I'm Mrs. Hepworth. I've created this video so that you can see the possibilities for your final exam. Congrats, it's almost the end of the school year. Earlier this year, I read the book, Not My Father's Son, by Alan Cumming. It's a memoir written in the first person and details a specific moment in his life. Alan Cumming, famous Scottish actor, grew up with an abusive father and a mysterious, missing maternal grandfather. Mr. Cumming comes to terms with his difficult and painful relationship with his father, while at the same time uncovering the truth about his grandfather. As Mr. Cumming films the genealogy show, Who Do You Think You Are?, two parallel stories, his own father's and his grandfather's, change his life forever when the truth and all its implications is finally revealed. The book has 4 parts. Each part flips back and forth between his childhood and young adult years and 2010 or 2011. I particularly liked the opening and closing scene. It began and ended with his haircut, which was a particularly awful memory that immediately characterizes his dad in the first chapter. From the start, we too, as readers and third-person observers, dislike his dad. At the end of the book, with returning to the image of his hair, we realize the pain and growth that Mr. Cumming experienced. Something that started as a source of torment resulted in forgiveness and pride. This book made me realize, how well do we actually know our parents? Much of the book, Mr. Cumming spends trying to uncover the truth about whether or not his dad is actually his dad. And I'm not going to reveal that mystery because it would ruin the ending of the book. But here's a particular moment that relates to how my thinking has been challenged. Mom remembered the night in question, all those years ago in Dunkeld at the dance in the hotel. But her version of events was quite different. She had not gone to another hotel room. They had not been discovered. She told me that the man in question, my supposed father, had a bit of a drink problem, and she remembered him needing to talk about it that night. So not only was my father gravely mistaken in his impression of what had gone on between them, he had also seen an act of kindness and consideration on my mother's part as betrayal and deceit. For most of our lives, up until we graduate college, parents are the authority figure. For Mr. Cumming, his father was a very scary authority figure because of all the abuse he inflicted on his family. As kids, we forget that parents are people and had lives, dreams for the future, friends, hobbies, before we came along. I'd like to think that I know my parents pretty well. I know where they went to college and how many people they dated before they finally found each other. But what I know is all because they took the time to share their stories with me and to answer my questions about what life was like back then for them. Mr. Cumming really did not know his father, except for the fact that he thought his dad hated him. Both of them left unanswered questions behind. Both were charismatic men with strong personalities, and both had left their imprint on me on every level, emotionally, spiritually, and genetically. Because of their absence, I was a changed man, and talking about them and telling the story of my insane summer was my way of trying to realign myself and clear a path through the wreckage they had left behind so I could move on. As Mr. Cumming clearly states, the people in and out of our lives influence us positively and negatively. I am an eternal optimist. I choose to see the good in everyone and everything. As I read this book, it broke my heart that Mr. Cumming suffered so much growing up. But I'm also glad to know that he forgave his father and is a stronger person because of what he dealt with. Uncovering the truth and acknowledging its influence in your life takes a lot of courage. Someday, I hope to have as much courage as Mr. Cumming. Because I realize my parents are their own individual selves, and now that I'm married and in my 30s, it's so important to me that I learn all I can from them and enjoy our time together. Last year, my last living grandparent passed away. Both my parents no longer have their parents anymore. That prospect, knowing I will be in that position one day, frightens me to my core. Therefore, I try to call my parents as often as I can and visit them whenever possible, which is difficult because we live 5.5 hours away. I want to know as much as I can about who they were before we knew each other. If you like memoirs, insight into a celebrity, heartfelt writing, pictures, and the type of book that makes you want to give the author a hug when you finish it, you should read Mr. Cumming's memoir. Throughout the year, I have definitely grown as a reader. I have continued to read one book after another. I still read a lot of historical fiction because it's my favorite genre and I absolutely love it. I've even found new books that I love, such as Malcolm Gladwell's nonfiction books and Purple Hibiscus, which was recommended to me by a former student. I've publicly shared my books read and to-read lists with everyone. They've been hanging on my wall all year for everybody to see. And I've also committed to book talks because I believe it's important for students to hear about as many books as possible. My reading plans for next year include to read the same number of books, if not more, than this year, and I haven't decided on the exact number of books that I've read this year because the year isn't over. I still have more to go. I definitely want to be more awesome at giving book talks at the start of next school year. And I finally want to get around to reading some of the books that have been on my to-read list for years. And lastly, I hope to attend some more author book talks to get more of my books signed. A great book should leave you with many experiences and slightly exhausted at the end. You live several lives while reading. Thank you for bearing your soul and sharing your story, Alan Cumming.